Today could go down in history as the day that changed everything in a war that's already killed over 100,000 people. In Syria, hundreds more are dead, many of them children. But this time it appears deadly chemical weapons were used, although that hasn't been verified. Potentially one of the worst war atrocities in recent memory. With Egypt also on the brink of civil war, this could be a turning point, not just for Syria, but for the Arab Spring as we know it. Our chief global affairs correspondent Martha Raddatz is there. As a note to our viewers, this important story includes incredibly graphic and disturbing images.
The images are gut-wrenching. Bodies sprawled across clinic floors, many of the victims' children, even infants. Others still fighting for life, rescuers trying to resuscitate them. Victims frantically gasp for air, lips turn blue. Their bodies show no other outward signs of injury, no blood.
The convulsions that we've seen in a number of people and babies, pinpoint pupils, gurgling is usually consistent with some sort of nerve agent poisoning.
The rebels fighting the Assad regime say Syrian government troops fired rockets on these innocents, rockets carrying poisonous gas. The images are impossible to verify for certain, and the Assad regime denies that poison gas was used, calling the claims baseless. But this weapons expert says the videos show clear signs.
The only explanation I can really see to this looks like this fellow's nerves are being destroyed potentially by something like sarin.
If verified, this would be one of the deadliest chemical attacks in decades. The Syrian opposition claiming over 1,000 killed, but the estimates vary. While there is still a question about the veracity of the claims of chemical weapons use, DeBretton Gordon does not doubt that the video is real.
I think the amount of children and babies who are dying and died, I don't think you could get children to fake that, in my opinion. So the fake idea, I think, is very unlikely. I'd be very surprised if it turned out to be a fake.
UN chemical weapons inspectors arrived in Syria earlier this week to investigate allegations of previous chemical weapons use. But today, the U.S. and other nations condemned this suspected attack and called for an urgent meeting of the United Nations Security Council to investigate.
This represents no matter what the conclusions are, a serious escalation.
There is work that can be done with our international partners to try to continue to pressure the Assad regime. We've seen evidence and indications that the Assad regime is feeling that pressure, but you're right that that has not resulted in the outcome that we would like to see, which is Assad being completely removed from power.
But the White House has said that before. Almost a year to the day, President Obama warned Syria not to cross a red line.
We have been very clear to the Assad regime, but also to other players on the ground, that a red line for us is we start seeing a whole bunch of chemical weapons moving around or being utilized. That would change my calculus. That would change my equation.
The estimated casualties in today's suspected attack far exceed previous suspected chemical attacks linked to Assad's government, the most deadly of which was in March, when at least 30 were killed.
It's not even a matter of cooperation.
But so far, U.S. aid to Syrian rebels has been slow to come.
What kind of military aid is getting to Syria from the U.S. right now, is actually arriving?
On the U.S. military side, the Department of Defense, besides the assistance with the humanitarian relief effort, we're also engaged in training of our Jordanian partners. As you know, we've got military planners in Jordan.
Do we have small arms arriving or no?
The Department of Defense is not engaged in arming the opposition.
In no way are we giving them any kind of arms, not small arms, not guns, not weapons.
The Department of Defense is not.
The uprising and unrest in Syria has already become a 2-year-long civil war with around 100,000 dead. Millions of Syrian refugees have already fled the civil conflict. Just 2.5 years after the end of the Arab Spring, unrest continues to build in neighboring Middle East countries from Iraq to Libya. And less than 400 miles away, Egypt continues to sit on the brink of civil war. The gains of the Arab Spring now in question. In the past week alone, more than 1,000 people have died and thousands more injured. The military's intervention sparked outrage across the world and in the U.S. I spoke with Egypt's interim Prime Minister Hazem al-Bablawi yesterday.
Where do you see this ending?
A goal is to prepare this country for a real democratic regime. We want to have a constitution, a modern constitution, open, with all the universal principles. We'll put it to referendum.
In Cairo today, government forces are trying to downplay the violent images we saw all last week.
What would you say to Americans about Egypt and about Egypt's security forces?
I invite them to come to Egypt and see the armed forces trying to secure the country against terrorism. They can come and see for themselves.
With all that has happened in Cairo over the past few months, it's hard to imagine any more fuel added to the fire. But any hour now, former President Hosni Mubarak is set to be released from prison in Cairo. When Mubarak walks out of Cairo's Tora prison, he won't exactly be a free man. Prime Minister Bablawi just ordered Mubarak to be placed under house arrest upon his release. Reaction on the street was disbelief.
This is horrible. It'll cancel everything we've been through. All the killing, all the bloodshed, it's devastating.
The demands that we have been fighting for, I don't see any have been realized.
Another sign that the hopes of the Arab Spring trampled in the dust. For Nightline, I'm Martha Raddatz in Cairo.
The UN Security Council has called for an emergency session in light of the attack.